Okay, hello. This is Chana Mason speaking to you from Jerusalem. You can hear I'm a little bit nasal. I might be sneezing. I've come down with a cold, but it was really, really important to me to be here with you, part of the Light of the Infinite Festival. I love the idea of people who are trying to bring more light into the world gathering together. Because one of the things that we forget is that we are literally beings of light. Now, that might sound like super spacey and Kabbalistic and mystical and all of that. But the reality is, if you actually look inside of ourselves, the deeper and deeper you go, the less you're engaging with matter and the more you're engaging with energy. We're literally a constantly vibrating, buzzing, energetic experience over here that gives us the illusion that there's something hard and material, but mostly we're just empty space. And in the midst of all of that space, there is so much opportunity for us to fill that space with consciousness, and a consciousness that can move our lives in the direction we want it to. Now, we are commanded in our tradition, in our Torah, we're commanded to be like God, to emulate God, to love God, to model after God, to be holy because God is holy, to do these things because God does these things, to bring justice in the world because God brings justice into the world. And how does God go about doing what he does? Well, we get a taste of that in the creation story. In the creation story, God says, let there be light, and lo and behold, there is light. So basically, he's using speech to create. And I'm sure you've experienced in the past that you've heard somebody speak and they've inspired you so deeply, they've literally moved you. What does it mean to be moved? Just think about it for a minute. The energy inside of you is starting to shake, is starting to do something. And through their speech, they can change what's inside of you. And maybe you make a different life decision. Maybe you go in a different direction. Maybe you just take one step closer to where you wanted to go. Maybe it's an athletic coach of yours and you're just feeling super tired and you think you don't have anything left. Or maybe it's the people cheering you from the stands and you think you're done, but you hear those words and they move you and suddenly you have energy you never thought you had. Now, what is the source of speech? Where does speech come from? So I'm not trying to get all super philosophical, just on a basic level. If I say, hi, my name is Chana, there was a moment that I was thinking that phrase before it came out of my mouth. So speech is, so to speak, the physical manifestation of thought. I speak what I think. Sometimes speaking is how I'm able to identify what it is I think in the first place. That's the easiest tool. If not through speech, I can do it through writing, or I can do it through conscious attention and focus by kind of speaking to myself in my head and asking myself questions inside of my head. But notice it's all happening through some sort of verbal expression that we're able to identify what it is we're thinking. So we have our thoughts lead to words, and words lead to creation. So we create first and foremost through our thoughts, and then we engage with reality. Most of us think that we have the thoughts that we do, we have the life experiences that we have because of the circumstances around us. We don't actually think of it as the opposite, that the circumstances of our lives are a product of the thoughts that we believe. Either the thoughts that we created as children, or sometimes the thoughts that we brought with us from a past life. You know, somebody might have been a prostitute in a past life and been treated absolutely horrible. So now they're walking into this life with a really phenomenal dad and some really nice brothers, but nonetheless, they've got this belief that men are slimy pigs. And if they believe that men are slimy pigs, it's going to totally change the way they engage with the world and with the people around them. And so those thoughts that we have create our reality. But the question for you is, how are your thoughts creating your reality? And is every single one of the thoughts that has taken port in your harbor really creating the kind of reality that you want? My experience is that I've had a whole bunch of thoughts that actually blocked me from where I wanted to go. The biggest ones that I've dealt with, that I've seen lots of people deal with, are I'm unlovable, I'm not worthy, there's something wrong with me, I'm not smart enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not pretty enough, right? I have a lot of those. I'm not whatever enough. Everybody's got those. And also, so-and-so is never going to blank, so it's not worth even trying. I'm not capable of doing X. This is too hard, or life is hard, or wow, this goal that I have, it's totally impossible. I can't imagine it, thus it can't be possible, right? We have all sorts of things that go through our minds. One of the areas that my husband, Dave, and I help people focus on a lot is the area of money. We have lots and lots of beliefs about money, most of which we developed when we were little children, and we don't even know what they are. They don't even get a chance to go into the speech mode. They're just driving our bodies into all sorts of behavior. So one time we met someone who was really struggling in their business, and they came to us for financial advice, and Dave decided, you know what, let's just skip all of the advice stuff and let's look a little bit under the surface first. And he said, can you please complete the following sentence? And he said, money is. And the guy's response was, the root of all evil. And then Dave asked again, rich people are, and the guy said, greedy. So if money is the root of all evil, you're going to do everything in your power to stay far away from money. And when you do engage with money, it's going to make you so uncomfortable, because who here wants to be evil, particularly the people watching this entire festival, right? We all want to be really good people. That's why we work on our personal growth and spirituality and all this stuff. So if we think that money is evil and not spiritual, so we're going to find ourselves in lots of financial difficulty. And if we think that wealthy people are greedy, we're not going to want to engage with wealthy people. We're not going to want to get anywhere near to being a wealthy person, because we don't want to perceive ourselves as greedy. We want to perceive ourselves as generous. So in order to actually experience financial abundance in our lives, we got to work on those thoughts. In order to experience relationship abundance, we got to work on those thoughts that say that I'm not worthy or I'm not lovable, because those thoughts get in the way of us having deep relationships. What most people learn about thoughts is that they are something to be observed. So in the Eastern tradition, we normally teach people to sit in meditation and close their eyes and just try to focus on the breath, which is really hard to do and a very important task in and of itself. But as you might know, if you've ever meditated, what comes to bombard this quiet you're trying to create? Lots and lots of thoughts. You might be thinking about what you're having for dinner. You might be thinking about what so-and-so said yesterday. You might be thinking about what present you're going to buy for your friend who just got married, right? There's like all these thoughts going through your head, and you don't want them interrupting this quiet that you're trying to create. But when you do that, you potentially miss out on the opportunity to encounter a part of yourself you didn't even know was there. Because embedded in every single thought, all these thoughts that are like these dragons that are coming to attack you. I'm not lovable. I'm worthless. Money is evil. Rich people are greedy. Whatever these thoughts are these dragons, right? Like when we go out trying to be knights in shining armor, trying to have valor and goodness and bring safety into the world, right? The last thing we want to do is deal with dragon after dragon after dragon. And we might want to just ignore them, push them away, shove them under the carpet, murder them immediately. But we miss out on the opportunity to really look at that dragon and recognize that behind every dragon is mamish, right? Just pure and absolute magic. There's magic behind every dragon. So what do I mean by that? I want you to imagine that you go to a new city and you meet a new person in a coffee shop. And you have this really interesting conversation with this person. Most people experience that, wow, that person came into my life for a reason. I'm curious to know what it is about this person that I need to learn. Or maybe you encounter a challenging circumstance like a car accident, or somebody yelled at you, or you lost your job. You might ask the question, why has this thing happened to me? Clearly it's for a purpose. And we don't always know what the purpose is, but we have this innate desire to attach purpose and meaning to the people and circumstances of our lives. So I do the exact same thing with all of these dragons. Excuse me. I do the exact same thing with all of these dragons. Every time one of these thoughts comes my way, I ask myself the question, what does this thought have to teach me? Because obviously rich people are greedy it won't benefit me to come up with more and more reasons why rich people are greedy if I actually want to be a person of abundance. So clearly the thought isn't teaching me that rich people are greedy. It's teaching me something else. And that's the question I want to ask here. What is it that thought is here to teach me? My experience is that within every thought, right, if we're dealing with magic anyway, so every thought is kind of like the dragon that laid the golden egg. And if you've ever engaged with a dragon's egg, which maybe you haven't, so they are shiny and stone-like, kind of like a diamond, and you can turn it around in different directions and it reflects light in all sorts of different ways. That's what dragon eggs do. So they keep going around. They're not like chicken eggs, not like reptilian eggs. They're shiny and they reflect light in so many different directions. And if you keep turning, you get a different shade of light. So here's this thing that says rich people are greedy. But if I keep turning it, I can start saying what Byron Katie calls opposites. There are lots and lots of opposites to rich people are greedy. And if I can find what those opposites are, those are the gems. Those are the magic that are embedded inside of that dragon egg. So what's the magic? Well, let me show you. Rich people are greedy. What's the opposite of that? So the question is, how do we build an opposite in the first place? It's really quite simple. You pick one word in the sentence and you switch it around. Rich people are greedy. So let's say I choose the word greedy. The opposite of greedy would be generous, let's say. So rich people are generous. Now, if I want to have any sort of chance of actually believing this new perspective and having it teach me something, I really have to go inside. And this is a different form of meditation. I'm not just trying to create quiet where there's nothing there. I'm creating a quiet that invites wisdom to rise up to the surface. So I can ask myself, how is it that rich people are generous? And if I want to believe something, if I want something to have standing in Jewish tradition, we have a concept called a chazaka. So a chazaka is when you have at least 3 experiences that all look exactly the same, or you have at least 3 pieces of evidence proving something to be true. So for me, I'm looking for at least 3 reasons why it's true that rich people are generous. And I can look inside and I can ask myself, have I ever seen that to be the case? And it turns out that I interact with nonprofits and foundations multiple times a week, and I see that most nonprofits are founded by really wealthy people, and they're immensely generous. I also happen to know that my neighborhood is here, Nachlaot, here in Jerusalem. There are a number of people who are in financial straits in my neighborhood, and I know that they're supported by the handful of wealthy people who live here. That's where they get the vast majority of their support. So right away, that tells me, wait a second, I've been looking at these wealthy people as being greedy and not paying attention to how they're generous. I can also look at some of the top philanthropists in the United States, for example, who've decided to create a whole club of philanthropists and encourage donations to everything from educational institutions to healthcare issues to poverty issues. And they're constantly looking for ways to make the world a better place. And I can also look at myself and I can ask myself, do I want to be a wealthy person? And I can say, yeah, I actually really do. And one of the reasons I want to be a wealthy person is so that I have the opportunity to be generous, because I have so many nonprofits that I care deeply about and so many causes I care about. And if I were wealthy, I could give more. And so just looking inside of myself, I can already see that if I had more, I would have even more opportunities to be generous. And maybe I'm not the only person who thinks that way. So that's one opposite right there. So let's go back to our original statement. Rich people are greedy. So I can pick a different word in the sentence. And in this case, I'm going to pick the word rich. So I can change rich to poor. Poor people are greedy. Now, mind you, when I said rich people are greedy, what my mind was doing, it was making a total absolute statement about all rich people in all circumstances. And if I'm able to question and notice that even some of the rich people I know are generous, then this total absolute statement starts to collapse. In the same way, if I'm able to see that some poor people are greedy, then that also makes my original statement collapse, because it turns out that maybe anybody could be greedy irrespective of how much money they have. So let's come up with some evidence for why poor people can also be greedy. So one reason that comes up for me is I've noticed that the vast majority of the people who steal are poor, right? I've been broken into, like 5 times in my life. And it was never by immensely wealthy people. Like, they have too many things to do with their time than to break into someone's home and try to steal. Another reason that I have for why poor people might be greedy is I notice within myself the times where I've really been financially struggling in my life, I tend to hold on really tight to what I have just out of instinct because I'm so scared to lose it. Another reason why poor people might be greedy, if I look at the percentage of nonprofit donations that come from poor people versus rich people, forget about it. Like 99% of what goes to foundations and nonprofits is coming from wealthy people. So there's just so much less abundance coming out of the poor than coming out of the rich in the direction of doing good in the world. So those are just some examples I came up with. Let's do one more opposite. So whenever I do opposites, I'm always looking for the opportunity to learn about myself and to work on myself. So already what I've been doing is trying to be more honest about rich people. And honesty is a really big value of mine. And if I really care about being an honest person, so then I need to be really more careful and more accurate in my description of people. So now I can already see that some rich people are greedy, some rich people are generous, some poor people are greedy, some poor people are generous, right? Like, all of this can be true. That's a much more accurate and honest description. And I'm much more in integrity if I see life that way. I'm more seeing reality as it is. And I'm a person who tries to live with integrity and who tries to be honest. Those are really important values of mine. But it turned out in this area, I was being pretty dishonest and not with integrity. And so I can look at myself and say, okay, this is an area where I can do more work. I can be more honest and try to look at life as it is. So there's another area where I can turn into myself. And that's by taking rich people and turning it around to me. I am greedy. And I can look at my life and see where are areas where I have been greedy. Oh my gosh, there are so many. So like a perfect example is yesterday, I bought myself this dress. This happens to be a brand new dress. I happen to really like it. And I could have taken that money and spent it on buying food for the poor people in my neighborhood. I could have spent the time that I went shopping for this dress, cooking a meal for a mother who just gave birth, or visiting a sick person, or spending time with someone's children who's like really stressed out. Like somebody who's stressed out, I could spend time with their children. I could have been doing that with my time, but instead I went shopping and spent my money on a dress. Now, mind you, that's a choice that I'm making, and I'm not saying going shopping and buying money on a dress is bad, but it's just one way that I can see for myself that I could be more generous, and I'm not. Sometimes people ask me for favors and I really don't feel like saying yes, so I say no. And if I really value generosity, I can look inside of myself and say, is there any area of my life where I could stretch myself and be more generous? So right now in this very moment, I can realize, wow, actually in the past month, I haven't given as much charity as I would like to give. So maybe after this video, I'm going to sit down and think of a nonprofit I care about and send them a money transfer. Why would I do that right now in this very moment? Because it's a way that I can take action and actually make the world a better place. Because thinking that rich people are greedy doesn't change rich people at all. It just makes me more of a miser. It totally constricts all of my consciousness. It makes my body tight. I get angry. I get stressed. I get frustrated. And when I'm angry and stressed and frustrated, I'm just less generous, even on a simple plane of I'm less generous with love. I'm less generous with my energy. I'm less generous with kindness. I'm less generous with smiles. It's really hard to be a smiling, happy, kind, thoughtful, compassionate person when you're busy being angry and frustrated about other people. So that's another way that I could be greedy, and it's even just judging other people. Another way that I'm greedy is when I think about all rich people being greedy. It's kind of a way that my ego can get a boost, and I can think, oh, well, those people are greedy and I'm so much better than them. And so it's a way that I'm becoming greedy with ego, right? I'm puffing up my ego and I'm getting greedy in how much I see myself and how much I puff myself up. And I'm not being particularly generous, in addition to being honest with looking at these people and the behavior that they do. So I hope that helps you a little bit, right? These are our dragons. They lay their dragon eggs. The dragons, they scare us. They make us feel bad. They're frustrating. And we can just try to push them away, push them out of the screen. Imagine they're like clouds flowing through the sky. And when we do that, that can help us in a quiet stillness breath meditation. But here we have a different kind of meditation that allows us to take those dragons and really look at them in the eye and look at their eggs and turn them around, keep turning them around and seeing all of the lessons that we can learn. If you want to learn more about how you can do this, you can check out my website, hanamason.com, and I have free book downloads, hanamason.com/books. So you can go to a book called Hold That Thought, where I really take people through this process, through a process of inquiry, of asking questions, of first identifying what are the thoughts that are blocking me. Then what can I do with those thoughts? Can I question their veracity? Can I say their opposite? Can I explore them? And can I then learn what values can I better espouse in this world? And what action can I take to actually be a better human being? So I want to take you through one of the tools that I use in that book, Hold That Thought, and it's called a rant. So a rant is something, imagine you're sitting with a friend, having a cup of coffee, and you've just had a frustrating day, and you're just telling your friend about your day. Well, yesterday I went to take a taxi, and this other guy, he cut me off, and he grabbed the taxi before me, and off they went, and I was so mad. So then I hailed another taxi, and you wouldn't believe it. Another guy cut me off and grabbed the taxi before I had a chance to get in. And I was even madder. And it's just totally unfair. I never seem to be able to get to work on time. And nobody ever gives me a break. And I just can't seem to change how things are in my life. It's so frustrating. That's a perfect example of something somebody might say when they're sitting with their friend having a cup of coffee. Excuse me one second. And if your friend just wants to rant and be heard, that's totally legit. Like, you don't want to interrupt that. But if they are interested in experiencing more clarity and peace and joy, you can ask them, hey, would you like to question those beliefs? Because I see that you're pretty stressed out. Would you like to experience more peace? And perhaps they say yes. And so already in everything that was said, there were certain beliefs that were stated outright. And there's certain beliefs that are under the surface, right? I can't get a break. I never seem to get to work on time. It's not fair, right? And you can ask this person, hey, what about the other person cutting you off upset you? And they could say, people are so rude and nobody ever sees me and everyone is so inconsiderate and the taxi driver isn't fair and just life in general isn't fair. Right? So here's a whole bunch of other statements. So we can take all of those beliefs and put them together and pop them into a thought bank. A thought bank is simply a collection of thoughts or beliefs I have about a certain topic in my life. And then we can ask the person we're having coffee with who's like totally vented about their work situation. We can ask them, hey, which of these thoughts made you the most upset? Which was the most and simultaneously felt the most true? And they might say, people are so rude. Okay? People are so rude. So we could say, okay, so let's take a look at that. And you can go through a process of inquiry. Now, there are lots of tools of inquiry that I use and that I teach, and you'll see them in my books. There happens to be one that makes the process of asking questions really, really easy. And so it's the one I like to teach the most. It's a tool that Byron Katie created called The Work. And the work contains 4 questions, and then you do these opposites that I mentioned earlier. Byron Katie calls them turnarounds. So we start with question number 1, is it true? So I can ask my friend, is it true that people are rude? And they might respond, yes, it's true. People are so rude. Question number 2, can you absolutely know that people are rude? And they might take a moment to stand back a little bit and to think, yeah, it seems to me people are rude. Great. Question number 3, right? Those 2 questions, there's no right or wrong answer. There's just a yes or a no. Ideally, an honest yes or an honest no. There's no right or wrong answer. So then we get to question number 3. How do you react when you believe that thought that people are rude? Now, when we're talking about reactions, we're talking about what happens inside of our body. What happens inside of us emotionally? And how do we behave towards other people and towards ourselves? So we can ask this question. How do you react when you believe that people are rude? And I'm just going to go within myself. How do I react when I think people are rude? I notice that my hands start to clench. My body gets really hot. My head turns down. My posture kind of slumps. I'm not able to think straight. My temper gets pretty short. And I don't really want to listen to people when I believe that people are rude. So now I want you to check within yourself. If you're believing that people are rude, what happens inside of your own physiology? What emotions come up for you, and how do you behave? Just take a moment to look inside of yourself and see what happens there. So my guess is that you had a collection of reactions not too dissimilar from mine, right? Your own flavor of closed and tight and negative emotions and all of that, but your own flavor of that. Now, the really interesting thing is we believe the things we do because we think they're going to get us where we want to go. And every time I ask someone, why do you believe that people are rude? Or why do you believe that you should lose weight? Or why do you believe that rich people are greedy? My experience is that people will say, well, I want there to be less rude people in the world. I want to lose weight. I want there to be less greed in the world. And then I can ask you, if you want there to be less rude people in the world, look at yourself when you're believing that thought. Are you likely to be more rude or less rude while you're believing the thought that people are so rude? I noticed if you paid attention to what I said, my hands got clenched, my posture went down, I don't really want to listen to people, and I have some anger swelling up. So think about people who have clenched fists, low posture, don't want to listen to you, and have some anger inside. What is the likelihood that they're going to be rude? In my experience, it's very high. Just the body language itself is rude. Just not wanting to listen to people is rude. So believing that thought makes me and makes you a more rude person. And here we wanted more kindness in the world. And that's great that you want more kindness in the world. It's definitely great that I want more kindness in the world, right? Because it makes my life better when there's more kindness in the world. The challenge is that this thought doesn't get us there. It doesn't get us where we want to go. It gets us in the opposite direction. And if it's getting us in the opposite direction, then we might want to explore what life would be like without this thought. And that's where we get to question number 4. Excuse me one more time. Okay, so question number 4 in Byron Katie's process, the work, is how would you be without the thought? How would you be without the thought? So you can close your eyes and take a deep breath and picture yourself in that exact same situation. So in this case, we've got, the guy trying to get a taxi and getting cut off, and we can stand there, imagine standing at the taxi stand, imagine somebody cutting us off. And the belief that people are so rude isn't there. If it's difficult for you to just let the belief go, you can imagine it walking out of your body, manifesting itself as some sort of a creature. You could give it $100 and send it off to the local market to buy chocolate or chips or pizza or beer or some other fun junk food. It's just like a fun way to literally visually imagine the thought leaving you. I notice for myself, when I watch the thought go, I'm much more capable of just breathing. My body relaxes, so I'm likely to be less rude. I can also look at this person who cut me off and already start thinking of reasons why they did. Maybe they have an emergency that I don't even know about. Maybe they simply didn't see me because they're so focused on whatever it is they're doing. Maybe this individual is rude, but that doesn't mean people in general are rude. So already my mind starts to expand and I stop going into that like tight, focused, myopic vision that stress causes in me. And now we get to the turnarounds. People are rude. People aren't rude. So how is it true that people aren't rude? Well, gosh, there are so many people in my life who do really, really nice things. There are people who actually see that I'm waiting in line for something and they say, oh, go ahead, go in front of me. When I'm driving a car, sometimes somebody will say, hey, go ahead, don't worry about it, I'm not in a rush. Or somebody just brings me a gift or flowers or writes me a thank you note. I just got a thank you note yesterday for something I did for a friend. And it felt so nice to get like an actual card, right? Everything's like email these days. So it was like an actual card with an actual handwritten note. And it felt so nice, right? It was a big kindness. And when I'm willing to explore that people aren't rude, suddenly my mind is able to see all of these kindnesses in the world that while I was believing people are rude, I couldn't see. Because our bodies and our brains do a really, really good job of following orders. And if we tell our subconscious that people are rude, so our subconscious will say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And if my subconscious says, yes, ma'am, we're going on a mission to find rudeness in the world. And it will literally start looking for all of the areas in my life where I see rudeness. And when there's kindness there, it'll ignore it because that's not the order. The order is to look for rudeness. So now I'm giving my mind an opportunity to explore non-rudeness. And suddenly it's just starting to pop up. I see it everywhere. Which brings us to the next opposite. People are rude can become people are kind. And I can notice that right at that same corner, there was a little woman right where, let's say I was trying to get a taxi or this guy was trying to get a taxi. There was a little old woman begging and so many people were passing her and giving her change. And perhaps I noticed that because I was so focused on my taxi, I didn't give her change. And maybe if I want more kindness in the world, I could focus on the old lady and maybe wait a little bit longer for my taxi. Maybe missing my taxis was a hint from the universe that I missed an opportunity to give charity. And because I care about kindness so much, maybe God is saying, hey, if you want more kindness in the world, first do the kindness and then wait for your taxi. And maybe the taxi will come more easily. And I could also just think of all of the many ways that people do kindnesses all the time. Like right now we've got this war going on between Russia and the Ukraine. And I'm hearing stories about people who are living in the Ukraine, even though it's really dangerous for them, just to take care of elderly people. My girlfriend, who's a Christian from the Netherlands, she has friends who live in the Ukraine. They're Christians, and they're on a mission to help Jews as much as possible. And there's a lot of elderly Jews in the Ukraine, and they, even before the war, they help them with food and housing and blankets and different medical services, whatever it is they need. They're always looking to help out Jews. And as soon as the war started, they said, wow, okay, this is a really precarious situation. Let's try to help Jews get out of the Ukraine and go to Israel. So they're using their time and their money and their resources to help people who they're not related to and they don't even know get out of this country just because they care, just because they're kind. That's like an amazing thing. And I'm sure you could think of hundreds of kindnesses that you interact with on a daily basis. And the most important opposite we can get to is the one that's about me and how I can be a better human being. So that one is I am rude. And I can notice how as that person was cutting me off, maybe I was saying a whole bunch of really mean things to that person as they were getting into the taxi. Or I could notice that I walked right past that beggar because I was in such a rush to catch my taxi, and I decided that my time was more important than being kind. Perhaps I could notice that once I did get the taxi, right, the third taxi came along, I finally got into a taxi. Maybe I was really obnoxious to the taxi driver and telling them all about all of these rude people and all of this stuff and how my city is a horrible place to live and nobody's respectful and blah, 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 blah. And this poor taxi driver now has to deal with this whole vitriol that they had nothing to do with. They're just see somebody wants a taxi and stop, which in and of itself is a kindness. Mind you, it's a kindness where they also benefit because they're getting paid. But there's a way of engaging with people where we can be kind and then receive even more kindness in return. But when we're believing that people are rude, we get so tight and mean and closed and that we actually create more rudeness in the world, when really what we want to create is more kindness in the world. But the only person who I can make more kind is me. And I can make myself more kind by increasing my compassion for the people who cut me off, looking for all sorts of reasons why they weren't meaning to be rude. They just had really pressing things going on in their lives. Or I can be more kind to myself and just recognize that it's okay. I'm going to be okay, even if I miss 2 taxis. If I'm 5 minutes late to work, everything's going to be okay. I can also be more kind to the taxi driver. And when I get into the taxi, say, thank you so much for stopping. I'm really in a rush. Is there any way that you can get me a little bit faster to where I want to go? Or maybe I could stop and spend 5 minutes talking to this old lady rather than just zipping past her because I'm in a rush. So when I do that, I become a kinder person. And that's what I wanted in the first place. I wanted a kinder world. But it's so easy for us to just like sit on our laurels and lean back and say, oh, people are so rude. And I don't change and I don't do anything. I don't work on myself, because kindness and compassion and honesty and integrity and courage, all of these values, they take work. They take effort. That's why we're in this period between Passover and Shavuot, where we're working on all of these different qualities within ourselves. Why do we focus on these qualities? Because they take so much work. We're hoping to be slightly more compassionate today than we were tomorrow. We're hoping to be slightly more honest today than we were yesterday. Oh, yesterday, not tomorrow. And as we do that, we make the world a better place. And part of how we can be more kind and compassionate and thoughtful and honest people is by looking at the thoughts that drive us into the kind of behaviors we really don't like to see in ourselves. So hopefully these dragons and learning how to slay these dragons is of help to you. And if you want to learn more, please feel free to be in touch with me directly. You can contact me through my website, hanamason.com, or through my email address, hana@hanamason.com. Here from Jerusalem with a bit of a cold, I send you so many blessings for pure health and pure joy. And if you're celebrating the holiday of Shavuot, that you should really get a taste, really get a taste of what it is to be standing at Sinai and to be receiving the Torah fresh and new for the very first time. Take care.